Hi, it's Pavel with another C# homework. This time it is we will be creating square of asterisks using using loops. This is a homework from C# 2012 How to Program, Chapter 5, Exercise 29. So we'll be writing an app that prompts the user to enter the size of the side of a square, then displays a hollow square of that size made of asterisks. Your app should work for squares of all side lengths between 1 and 20. And if the user enters a number that is less or greater than 20, your app should display a square of size 1 or 20 respectively. In other words, if they enter less than 1, we will by default make it 1. If it's more than 20, we will by default make it 20. All right, let's get to it. So, what do we need? We need some variables, of course. Now, first, we need the size of the square that the user will want. So, here it is, integer size. By default, initialized default is 0, which will be, of course, changed down the when we start processing the loop and the user input. Now, we will do a character star that equals star. So instead of typing stars each time, we will actually have a variable called star. It could be a constant actually because it doesn't change, but that's good enough for now. We will also need spaces because the square, remember, is supposed to be hollow, not filled. So there will be a star, then a bunch of spaces, and then there will be another star at the end. It's like just gonna be a square. So I will do another character space, and it equals a space. And we'll need a counter for the loop. And the minimum is normally I would start with 0, but in this case let's start with 1 because you will need at least one star. So let's ask the user for the input. Right line. Please enter the size of the square. All right, and we will assign it to our variable size. We'll have to convert it to integer, of course, to int 32, and console.read line. So with this, user is prompted to enter the size is entered, and we will store it in our variable called size. Simple enough. Now we have to check whether the user entered number less than 1 or more than 20, and assign the default value if user entered wrong value. So if size is less than 1, we will assign size equals 1. Else if size is greater than 20, then size equals 20. In other words, these are the default values if user enters the value wrong. So now let's get to looping. Let's do a while loop this time. While counter is equal to size. Actually, while counter is less than equal to size. Remember, counter starts at 1, not 0. If it started at 0, it would be just less than size. But since it's already started at 1, we want the exact number that the user enters. So while okay, we will. So the loop starts, and now thing. Now remember the first and last row will be full of asterisks. It will be like this. However, the rows between them will be. Let me. This is what we're creating. There will be a star, then the spaces, and then will be a star at the end. Same with this row, and then the last row will be full of stars again. So this row and this row are processed differently than the hollow ones in between. All right, so we have to check for that. So if counter equals 1 or counter equals the size, in other words, if it's the first row or the last row, then uh, then we will do the row full of asterisks. So let's get another variable called index equals 1 and do another loop within the main loop. So while index is equal or is less or equal to size, console dot write, not a write line because we're writing continuous characters. We'll write the star, and of course we need to increase the index. Okay, so if this is true, if this is the first row or the last row, then we will output one row full of asterisks. Now if it is not, then we want to oh, wait a minute, where's my closing bracket? I think I put it too far. Yeah, so this is the now if it's not, in other words, if it's the middle parts, the hollow part, and oops, too far. If this is the middle part of the square, then again we'll do the index equals 1, and while index is less or equal to size, then we will write the first character as a space, the first character as a star, followed by a bunch of spaces, and end it with another star. So if index equals 1 or index equals size, this will print the first and last star. Let's say this one and this one. We will console dot write star, and else we will write a space. Console dot write space, and at the end we of course in the while loop we will have to increase the index. Now don't get confused with two different indexes. This is a local variable and gets out of scope right here. So this index and this index, even though they have the same name, they do not interfere with each other at all because they are declared only within these between these two brackets, and this one is between these two brackets. Once the program hits this bracket, this index is gone. When it hits this bracket, this index is gone too. So you could call them index 1 and index 2. And, you know what? Let's do that just to make sure that not to confuse anyone. There. Okay, so we have that. Now we need to remember, this is one loop. This is the main loop with two smaller loops. So we still have to write it out. Console dot write line. Just an empty line, just to make a space, and we need to adjust the counter for this loop, for the outside loop. In other words, these two statements will write the spaces and stars. This one moves the cursor to the next row. So when it hits again over here, it will start the next row, the second row. All right, so it should work. Let me do my console dot read line just so we can see the output. All right, let me test it quickly, see if it works. All right, so let's make it a 5. And there you have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you got the star and spaces, and the last row is stars again. Let's try something outside. It's supposed to be between 1 and 20, so let's try I don't know, 25. It shouldn't give any error. It should just default it to 20. So let's see if that works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it defaulted it to 20 and made it a, well, it's a rectangle because the line spacing is different. But it is 20 by 20. So let's recap. Let's see what we did. We declared our variables. Star holds the star, space holds the space. The size is what the user will enter, and counter is for our loop. We ask for the user to enter the size of the square. We checked whether the number user entered is between 1 and 20. If not, we defaulted it to either 1 or the 20. And then we went to the main loop. Now within the main loop, we checked if we are writing the first or the last row. The first or the last row. If that was the case, we declared an index just for this loop, and we wrote the stars. This loop was performed completely before next iteration of this loop started. In other words, this loop on the first row, when the counter equaled 1, which is the starting position, it wrote this. And when the counter, let's say the user entered 5 as a size, so when the counter equaled 5, then this loop wrote or displayed this row. Now, if it wasn't the first row or the last row, then it had to be the one in between, obviously, and it was hollow. In other words, we only printed two stars, one at the beginning and one at the end. So we declared another variable for our inner loop, and we checked whether this index was less or equal to size. In other words, if it was the first, if it was the last iteration, and if it was, then we checked. I'm sorry. Let me say this again. In this loop, we looped just like in this one. We looped the full row. So if the size was 5, it did 5 iterations. But within that, we were checking whether you are writing this character or the second character, which would be the space, or if it was the last character, which would be a star again. In other words, if it was the first character or the last character. If it was, we wrote a star. If it wasn't, we wrote a space. So in other words, it hits the loop, it writes the star first. The next iteration, this is not true, it goes to else, it writes a space. Then it goes again, this is not true, it goes and writes a space. And when the last iteration is hit, this is true again, and it writes the last star. And then it moves to the main loop over here and does another row. So there you have it. Hope it helped you. Hope it didn't confuse you even more than you were. And I'll see you next time. Take care.